Fun because they're so interesting and informative. So I can't tell you how delighted I am to have you all here today because we have this absolutely wonderful launch of the CBC Dubai Technology Connect Group. Special thanks again to our sponsors and friends who have made this possible. Obviously, the CBC Dubai team. And I get goosebumps because we have so much help from our consular section and our embassy that makes all these things happen. And not to mention our special friends across the sea from Canada. And I'm going to let you get on with it already because I see we're already recording, which is fantastic. So that way we can have the option of looking at this at a later date. So without further ado, I'd love to dive right in and have you all meet Ruda, our fantastic chairman, who has made all this happen. So special thanks to Ruda and the team. Thank you, everyone. And please feel free to reach out to us anytime at CBC Dubai. Take care. Ruda.
Thank you very much, Diana. And everyone, welcome to the first ever event hosted by the CBC's Technology Connect Group. We're very, very excited about the idea of Connect Groups. And I wanted to take a moment to explain to our members and to those of you who aren't members, a little bit about what they are. So for over 25 years, the CBC in Dubai has been helping Canadians and Canadian alumni build relationships and build their knowledge so that they can succeed in their business endeavors in the UAE, whether that's people like me who run our own businesses or others who work within business environments. And one of our core objectives this year has been to really create opportunities for smaller groups of members to get together in smaller communities that align a little bit more closely with their core interests. And we label these initiatives Connect Groups. Over the course of the coming few months, you will be seeing a lot of talk about Connect Groups. We'll be launching a few of these, including the one today, which is the Connect Group for Technology and Technologists. The goal of this Connect Group is to focus on Canadians operating in or Canadians who are interested in learning about new technologies and learning about how to utilize technologies within their business environments so that they can get a competitive edge. So the goal really is if you are into tech, you want to be into tech, or if you are someone like me who takes an interest in how to move their 20th century organization into the 21st century and move it from 1996 to 2021, the Connect Group for Technology and Technologists is there for you. Heading up our effort in this regard is an excellent gentleman and a personal friend of mine named Rohit Gupta. Rohit is not only profoundly handsome, he is also the regional marketing product head for MasterCard and took on this role in delivering higher engagement, retention, and innovating within the digital marketing realm, specifically at MasterCard. Prior to that, Rohit was a senior partner delivering advisory and tech advisory support at Wipro, which all of you will know is one of the largest ERP and enterprise solutions providers in the world. So there are a few people that we know in Dubai who are more qualified to be leading the Canadian community and its efforts to expand and really highlight Canadian technology. And that's what we're all here for. So without taking up more of anyone's time, Rohit, I leave the floor to you.
Thank you, Ruda, and thank you for those compliments as well. So thank you so much. Looking forward to being the first moderator for our Connect Group, and I think it's going to be an exciting platforms. So we're going to kick off today with two speakers. I'm going to introduce them shortly. Tom Cumming and Ali Hirji, both of them are in Canada right now, freezing Canada. We would love to have you guys over here. It's 25 degrees Celsius. It's amazing in Dubai. Exactly. And then post their quick presentations, I'll ask them a few questions, and then I think Diana will open up for the moderator so that we can ask the attendees to also ask them questions. So we would love to make this a very interactive communication. So quickly, our first speaker is going to be Tom Cumming. He's the Deputy Director for the Toronto Regional Office at the Trade Commission Services. He's had his Bachelor of Commerce from University of Alberta, law degree from University of Victoria, and an MBA from University of Navarra in Barcelona. Looks like Tom has been fairly international. He has helped the Canadian government operate software companies out of China. And he's also helped the global affairs of Canada to serve against the Canadian Trade Office in Taipei as well. So it looks like he's had quite a bit of international experience. So we're very, very excited to hear from Tom. And our next speaker after Tom will be Ali Herji. He's the lead for Durham's College AI and Cybersecurity Labs. He is a PhD in communications and holds multiple research and teaching positions. He has over 14 years of experience of implementing various technology in government, academics, and not-for-profit sectors. He has also held senior roles to enable remote connectivity, implement technical trainings, bolster cybersecurity frameworks, and enhance access to mission-critical applications. So I'm going to go on mute. Tom, you're up first, and then Ali after that. Look forward to inspiring conversations from you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rohit. And thank you, everybody at the CBC. Ruta, Diana, thank you for making me feel welcome. Ali, I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And Rohit, just so you know, there's going to be a part later in the presentation where I saw in your bio that you do a bit of stand-up. Well, we're developing an AI-powered stand-up robot in Canada, if you can believe it. So maybe you can have a little face-off.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so my name is Tom Cumming. I'm the Deputy Director here at the Regional Office of the Trade Commissioner Service in Toronto. And if you were wondering, yes, it is snowing. It's been snowing every day. So I hope you're enjoying the heat there in the UAE. What we do primarily is the Trade Commissioner Service is that we are the export promotion arm and investment attraction arm of Global Affairs Canada, which is our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Today, we're going to talk mostly about AI, and the angle for me, I guess, is a little bit on the investment attraction side as well. We welcome partners from abroad to help us build our AI infrastructure. Canada is as might sound a little familiar to some people where you are, a country with great natural resources that has always been the basis of our economy, and we're working on a shift towards more human resources and in trying to become an innovation nation. One of the areas we're particularly excited about is AI, and as we go into the presentation, and Ebba, you can put it up whenever you like, we'll talk a little bit about how we've tried to build that infrastructure, why we have a competitive advantage, we feel, how that sort of plays into our economy of the future, and how that you can get involved. Ebba, are we doing okay? Can we get the presentation popped up on the screen? As we're doing that, as well, I'd like to highlight that one of my colleagues is here today, Zinnia Jamshed. She's in our headquarters in Ottawa. She is also the expert among the two of us. So if the hard questions come in, I'll be pushing them to her. Yeah, I think we're just starting up. There we go. Perfect. Excellent. So we could go to the next slide, please. Today, I'll take about 10 minutes. It'll be a quick kind of walkthrough on Canada's AI leadership. And then, you know, once we've also heard from Ali, then we'll be happy to answer some questions for you. As we spoke about, AI is one component of our ICT sector. ICT is right now in Canada, the hottest growth sector, about 43,000 companies, lots and lots of exports. One of the things that Canada has, you know, as a strength is our research and development. One thing that we do not have as a strength is the size of our market. We're under 40 million people. So when our companies start to grow and scale, they immediately have to look abroad. And that's where my ministry comes in. You'll see that a lot of this, the sector is supported by a great deal of R&D spending. Over 40% of our entire R&D spending goes into ICT, into anything digital, I guess we'd say. And you can see as well, this is about 7.5 billion Canadian dollars. Go to the next slide, please. Oh, I think we've got a little lag. There we go. Again, we've seen a great deal of foreign direct investment. Canada is very welcoming in this way. We invite partners in. In addition to having a smaller market, we also look towards foreign financing and foreign investment into sectors that we're trying to scale. Within the sector itself, over $200 billion in revenues, and a great deal of jobs are tied in, and increasingly so, and deliberately so. We are trying to, right from our educational system through post-secondary and into the jobs market, we are trying to emphasize a greater role on the emerging technologies of the future. And this, as you can see at the bottom, is cut up into 8 subsectors. I'll let you read them. I'm not going to read a slide to you, but artificial intelligence, of course, is one of those 8 pillars. Next slide, please. Okay, there's going to be a few graphic heavy slides here. This basically shows where our AI sort of base is, how it's distributed within Canada. There's the largest of these 3 groups basically are in Edmonton, and we'll discuss this a little bit later, Toronto and Montreal. But it is because there is no necessary geographic concentration for AI. So the sector is very spread out. So we've got a great deal of research hubs, all a little bit specialized depending on what their normal traditional kind of sectors of practice are. Next slide, please. Oops, we've got a bit of a lag. This sector is, I'm happy to share the presentation later. This is way too much information for anybody to take in, but the idea behind it is it shows you just how many players we have in the area and how many we're developing. And you'll notice that there's some, many of the parts that are necessary in an AI ecosystem are here, whether it's academic labs, research and development centers that may or may not be tied to universities, a great deal of startups. Startups need money, so we've got a great deal of funders, lots of incubators and accelerators, venture capital organizations. So this basically is just to show you how busy the sector is. Next slide, please. Just got a little bit of a lag. And here we can talk a bit about the basis and what we're growing from. When we say we've got a competitive advantage, the top talent and experience part, we've got 4 kind of luminaries in the area who are world leading kind of thought leaders in the area. Geoffrey Hinton is called the godfather of AI. He did a great deal of work on this when nobody thought that machine learning and AI was possible even. Joshua Benjo, he's in the University of Montreal. He was, the driving force behind Element AI. Richard Sutton at the University of Alberta, and Jeffrey Gordon. The one interesting thing amongst all these 4 is not one of them was born in Canada. Joshua Benjo was born in France. Geoffrey Hinton was UK, and Mr. Sutton and Mr. Gordon were both American. And they came to Canada for one very good reason, is that in Canada, we have a very strong research and development background. As a country, we've had a lot of problems to solve, having a big country and not necessarily a hospitable one. We've got cold temperatures, we've got great spaces. So we've put a great emphasis on allowing academic freedoms and the ability to solve these problems. And this has attracted these gentlemen and many like them. As you can see in the second column, we've got about 800 AI companies, but actually there's many, many more than that. These are 800 of a level where they're probably worth counting, but lots and lots in development. And they're growing very quickly. We've got 60 publicly funded research labs, 75 incubators and accelerators, and 60 dedicated AI investor groups. You can see how the venture capital side of it is growing. And it's growing a lot. We're drawing a lot of interest from foreign venture capital as well. A lot of American interest from the Valley, interest from all over the world. Beyond that, you can see that we've also got a strategy that is run through the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research. And this is government support. And government is attempting to support at all levels for AI because we want to ensure that the industry is strong, the sector is strong, and the underpinnings of it, the research and development basis, is also strong. You'll see a notation at the bottom about Scale AI. So Scale AI is the supply chain, the supply chain and logistics excellence supercluster. We have superclusters across Canada under the government strategy. So, for example, digital health is in Vancouver. We got Alberta has a strong one on protein and the food supply of the future. Toronto has advanced manufacturing, next generation manufacturing. The Ocean Supercluster is out of our maritime provinces. And then finally, the crown jewel in AI is Scale AI in Montreal. These are all part of a government strategy to try to bring together a critical mass of companies to make this industry strong and sustainable. You'll see on the right-hand side that these investment attraction, the basis we've built is attracting the big companies. And this is kind of a who's who of who's doing research and who's doing kind of product development in the AI side. We go to the next slide, please. Let's get a little lag still. How are we doing? Good. On the policy side, so in order to have a functioning AI ecosystem, we created a national AI strategy. We got in a little bit before a lot of other countries, and this was allowing us to be more of a pioneer in the area. We wanted to try to lead in a lot of different kind of portions of the AI infrastructure. You'll see here that there's 3 sectors of excellence. I kind of mentioned them, Mila, the Vector Institute, and Amy. These are kind of world-renowned at this point, centers of excellence. As well, we've done a lot of work through Scale AI to really try to bring that supercluster concept together and into a reality. And then we're trying to do a global partnership. You'll see the initiatives we're doing with France. The idea being that we know that we have to be strong across all areas, including on the policy development side. If we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about that as well. There we go. So this shows how once we started really focusing on the area, we started attracting the major companies such as Microsoft, Google, and so forth. There's announcements almost weekly on new entrants into the area. As well, we're bringing in a lot of foreign investment into Canadian companies, so those aren't quite as flashy as seeing Google try to set up or seeing Microsoft setting up. This area is increasing very quickly. There's a 2.3 times since 2017, but that's accelerating per year as well. And Canadian companies, as a result, are benefiting across the range of traditional sectors, as well as they seek to bring in artificial intelligence into their processes. The products of these companies, or the services of these companies, how you say, will benefit across our traditional sectors as well. Next slide, please. There we go. So here's where we can talk a little bit about AI. So we're a member of a number of kind of policy bodies internationally, as well domestically, have been set up. The idea behind this being, there's a great deal of thought to be put into how AI will be used. The flashy example is, we don't want to start, an AI, human versus robot war or anything to this extent. It's facetious, but we do want to have an AI sector that is responsible, that protects the privacy of individuals in the data collection phase, and that is really maximized in terms of the benefit of the public good, while protecting the privacy and the private lives of individuals. So a lot of the thinking of this at all levels of government goes in. People like the Ontario Digital Service for the province of Ontario spend a great deal of time writing policy, writing guidelines, and making these the kind of the guidebook for industry as it goes forward on how it will deal with, for example, in the public sector, in dealing with government, and dealing with data collection. So I think we've been a leader in that area as well, and we've worked very closely with international partners to make sure that there is, the ethical side of AI is taken care of at the same time that we're attempting to commercialize applications based on artificial intelligence. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a very graphics-heavy slide, but it just shows you the thriving infrastructure here. This is Toronto, just as one example. So 81 investment hubs and accelerators, 92 funders, and over 5,000 startups currently, being processed towards becoming larger companies. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is just a little bit about Canada and why this would be an attractive investment destination. I'll let you read from the screen, but essentially, we've done a great deal to try to really shore up our education to make it stronger and make it the education that will produce the knowledge workers of the future. You'll see how our rankings we're doing quite well. We're very welcoming to foreign students. We benefit greatly from foreign students, foreign workers, foreign investors, and immigrants. We're absolutely a nation of immigrants. You can see even when you look at the 4 kind of luminaries that we have, they all came from somewhere else, but if you ask them today, they are Canadian first, with a background from some other place. And I think that's fairly typical of the Canadian experience. Next slide, please. Okay, and this shows how early we got in. So basically, we got in quite early. We've started focusing on this quite early. We're reaping the benefits now, and now we're partnering, very widely across with different nations, with different corporations, and we want to continue to do so. So part of the reason I'm here today is to give a bit of a look at the AI system, but also to say we are welcoming. If there are applications that are of use, if there are companies, a Canadian company, or if you have a problem that needs solving, please let us know. We'll let you know the Canadian company that's working in the area or the Canadian research organization. We will bridge them as the Trade Commissioner Service. We are the ones who work to create those networks abroad, and we'd be happy to discuss further with you. Next, and I believe final slide. So yes, please get a hold of me. That is my email. It is not an info box. Zinnia's email as well shows just below that. We'd be happy to discuss with you if you have any questions, if we can provide more information about Canada, about the AI sector itself, or just if you have any general questions you'd like answered. So I'll conclude with that. I hope I haven't taken up too much time, because I definitely want to hear what Ali's got to say. And thank you all for listening, and I'll be sticking around for the Q&A session as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. Ali, over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Rohit and Tom. As always, thank you for setting the context. So for those who are listening to me, it's everything basically that Tom said, and I'll try and add a little bit of my 2 rupees onto that, and hopefully it's useful for all of you. So Tom, thank you for setting the stage so fantastically well, and for the awesome slides as well. Heba, you can go on to the next slide, and then I'll jump right into the deep end of my presentation. Please proceed. So a little bit about me. Before I even tell you a little bit about me, let me just tell you about the philosophy that I've taken to AI at Durham College. Durham College is about 2 years old in the world of artificial intelligence. I think we're about 45 minutes east of Toronto, and we have a very small lab from where we develop prototypes. We've got as Tom had mentioned, in terms of educational outreach, we've got a graduate program in artificial intelligence. We have an undergraduate degree in artificial intelligence as well. We have data analytics, and we have computer science programming. What I've done is I've just taken all of the skill sets that we have within that and reached out to industry to say, hey, if you want to develop a prototype, you want to do some R&D with artificial intelligence, reach out to me and my students, and for a very small fee, you'll be able to develop a little prototype that you'd need. As many of you know, there is absolutely no AI without IA. There's no artificial intelligence without information architecture. And my work at Durham College, alongside my students and my colleagues, has been primarily around helping companies understand the data that they have and how you can unlock that data for insights. That's why we call this session the return on imagination. The return on investment on the data that you have or could potentially have is really about your imagination. Today, you're selling A, B, and C. What if I told you the data could predict how much you could sell and where you could sell and how you could sell and how best to optimize that sale? Imagine what you can do with that data. And that's been our raison d'etre. That's been the reason we've been able to get about 65 companies working with us, not just companies in Canada. We're doing work with 2 companies in India, 1 company in the Bahamas, 1 out of East Africa as well. Case in point, what we've been able to do is demonstrate a little bit of leadership around how do you take these nebulous concepts around AI and apply them in a way that you can see a tangible return. That's been my philosophy at Durham College. You have major AI players across Canada that are doing breathtaking research and are finding out for you the next best thing after sliced bread, which is awesome. My role has strictly been, this is what we know about AI. This is how we know we can apply it. Here's how we can develop the prototype for you. Once you've got the prototype, if it passes the litmus test with your team and you can see the ROI, boom, now you can hire the students that you need. Now you can hire the team that you need in order to, as Tom had mentioned, scale up. As I mentioned before, my name is Ali Hirji, but not only do I lead the AI Hub, I also lead the Center for Cybersecurity. And as Tom brought up as well, the emphasis on ethics in AI, the emphasis on securing AI has not fallen short of us. We focus on a concept called XAI, explainable AI. And I'll talk a little bit about that as I move along. Hiba, you can go on to the next slide, please. I'll wait for that slide to transition. So my outline for today, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about how we define insight. That is, how do you unlock something from data? Data is not about numbers. No, you would have seen in the marketing for this event, we mentioned a line which I love a lot, which is, if AI is the rocket, data is the fuel. Take an example of Netflix. When you go on to Netflix and you watch a certain type of show, so if you're me, you're watching a healthy dosage of cricket and probably shows about butter chicken and biryani. Once Netflix gets a sense of my viewing tendencies, Netflix is then able to tag that against my profile and start recommending more shows to me. You see, it's not just about the numbers that, all right, he watched one show on Mumbai Indians, another show on the Australian cricket teams. It's about unlocking insights. What does that tell you that he watched these shows? What does it correlate to? And it also shows that he's watching shows about Indian cooking, for example. What else can we recommend to Ali? Suddenly I see recommendations, for example, of travel shows or vlogs or whatever have you. There's a lot of insight that you can lock from the data. Think about it this way. If I give you, we were talking about Tim Hortons cups in the green room prior to joining the session. If I give you an Excel sheet and I tell you that 5 people in this sheet drink, one person drinks Starbucks, another drinks Tim Hortons, and another person drinks A, Y, and Z, you might be able to draw some insight from it to say, yeah, this might tell you a little bit about, where someone lives, what their economic status is, so on and so forth. But what if I gave you 1 million data sets? How quickly could you unlock that? One of the major things why in Canada we've been able to draw insight from data is because of the power of compute that we have as well. So in all of those clusters that Tom was mentioning, there's a huge amount of computing power from the IBMs of the world, the AWSs of the world, the Microsofts of the world that are powering our ability to unlock insight from data and giving us those aha moments, which we're capitalizing on. And we've done a pretty good job of that. And Durham College is a good microcosm of that, which I'll talk about in my first agenda item. Next, what can AI teach us? Specifically, I'm going to be talking about the process via which we clean data. One of the things that I always like to mention when talking about data is talking about AI solutions specifically driven by data. Do not go about just building solutions. First, understand the problem. Without understanding the problem, the solutions don't necessarily fit directly. I meet with at least 4 different companies a day wanting to talk to me about AI. It's great. It's a great break from the monotony of teaching online. But out of those 4 companies that I meet, I pray to all the gods that I know that only one of them actually goes, yep, I want to do something with AI. That's because we often use AI as this buzzword. I cannot tell you how many times I have people coming to me going, I want to use AI to do this. I want to use AI to do that. But you truly need to understand what is AI. And I'm going to take you through a little bit of a process of top-up and bottom-up programming through which I've been able to help companies understand if AI is actually worth it for them. Data, data, data. I will close with one little thing about data, and that is explaining to you where you can find this data. Here in Canada, we have this statement, in God we trust, everybody else must bring data. There's a lot of emphasis on data, but I want to go through the good, the bad, and the gray when it comes to data and how companies need to be approaching this before determining if AI is the right solution for them and understanding the return on imagination while using AI. Hiba, next slide, please. I will wait for the slide to come. So, eyesight is useless if insight is blind. What does this mean? Many companies can see that there are certain problems in the work that they're doing. So for example, I'm dealing with a manufacturing company right now. I don't have the permission to say their name, but one of the things that they have is an issue with QA, quality assurance. When a particular product is coming out of the assembly line, because of the speed at which the products are returning or are being pushed through the assembly line, they're now finding themselves in a situation where human error is not catching. Because of human error, they're not catching a lot of the defects that they might have in some of their products. So the question comes up, sure, can we do a computer visioning model? Can we take a camera, embed a software onto it? Kind of similar like the new passport thing that you have at Dubai airport, where now you don't need any physical document and the camera takes a picture, scans your face and annotates it and says whether you are who you are. Can we do something where we implant something into a camera that can take a picture of what's going out of the production line and determine if there's a flaw with it and push it out and not allow it to go into dispatch or go into the supply chain system to be sold? Absolutely sounds very doable. The problem over here is that eyesight is absolutely useless if insight is blind. It's not just about that camera and the software. You have to start thinking contextually about AI. Put this on a shirt, all right? AI is not just another software product that, that sits on your stack. AI is almost like another addition to your organization chart, all right? It's a system, it's a process, it's a person literally that has to be trained, that has to be exposed to different scenarios. AI learns over a period of time. You will give the AI model lots and lots of data to look at what are the deficiencies in this cup? What are the different ways in which this Tim Hortons cup could be defective such that it may not hold the hot coffee? What are some of the deficiencies when it comes to size, placement, logo placements, etc.? But there will always be more things that it has to look for, more items that it has to pay acute attention for. So number one, when you are developing an AI solution, understand this is not plug and play. It's almost like another team member. You need to consistently feed it with new data. You need to consistently make sure that it's seeing new pieces of information. You need to validate the information that is out there as well. Very, very important that your AI systems get a feed loop. You've got to be thinking about context when it comes to deploying an AI solution. I cannot tell you how many times, whether it's the Internet of Things or an AI or a combination of the two, organizations have failed with their deployments simply because they haven't thought about the bigger context around these data tools, around AI. You can see it doing a particular function today, but you need to have that insight around what are the skills that I need to maintain it? What are the data sets that I need to maintain it? A very, very good, powerful example of this is when Google started off doing annotation of images. Many of you may know this, that when Google rolled this out, I think 2013, 2014, don't quote me on the time, but when you have the ability now to send a picture into a Google system and then get it annotated automatically to tell you what's in the picture, many of you would know that situation where people with darker skin complexion started getting tagged as animals. That's simply because of a lack of data. That's simply because of, well, you had a lot of data perhaps, but who gathered that data? What are the biases that come on with that? AI is such a complex system. It is not just a plug and play software, which is why you need folks like Tom, for example, not just to guide you on the technical side, but on the contextual side of AI as well. When I develop AI solutions for different companies, 90% of my time is spent with the subject matter experts in marketing, in business dev, and engineering. 10% of it is spent with the IT team. That 10% can be very painful, but growing is painful, as they say. Next slide, please. I'll wait for the slide to transition. Now, another 2 more minutes and then I'll be all done. When I ask any company to start telling me about their AI solution or what they want to do from an AI perspective, I first ask them to outline the problem. We live in a very strange time where not only do our kids and our computers, and not only do our kids talk back to us, so too do our computers. You need to be able to flesh out the problem for me in complete depth. You're definitely using some form of technology. Why isn't that working? There is a very big difference between deploying for AI and using programmatic scripts, which I'll talk about in detail in my next slide. But if you pay attention to this, the first point that I do, don't talk to me about the solution. Stop telling me you want AI to do this and this for you. Tell me about the problem. Once they tell me the problem, for example, low quality assurance on their products, I then ask them, okay, show me the data that you've collected. And let's look at that data to see whether that data is telling us anything about the problem that you're talking to me about. Once you know that, that problem should not just be articulated by the CEO, it can be articulated by other folks in the business as well. You've got to do some information gathering. I then look at, okay, let's collect some data about this situation. How many products have come out of the assembly line? How many of them have been faulty? How many of them have been returned? Not just that, give me more feedback on it. Why were they returned? How quickly were they returned? As much data about data as I can get. And there's a process there on how you collect data. Number one rule I'll give any companies that are trying to get into the space of AI or want to launch something successfully in AI, you need to have your data and your databases on point. Once you have the data in place, let's sanitize this data. What are data sets that we need? What are data sets that we don't need? Have a subject matter expert look at this. Is it relevant at all that somebody returned a product or called to return in a product after 6 months? Well, no, the warranty period ends in 3 months. Really, 6 months is irrelevant. You move that data set out of there because all of those data sets can skew your model. You need to know how to read this data and know what do we need to use, what don't we need to use. Then you convert this data sets into something that's usable. For my model, for example, for the manufacturing plant, now that I have this data, now that I know how many pieces have returned and that are defective, I'm then going to convert this data into something which I can use. Pictures, videos, customer annotations, customer notes, timestamps, put it into an SQL database that I can read the data from, and now I can train my model to look at what defects are and what are the most common defects from the million returns, let's say, we received. Once I've trained my model, I then test and utilize my model, placing it on that camera. That process can take about 6, even 12 months. The true thing to remember in all of this is that you have to stop sweating the small stuff. There's no one size fits all. There are multiple players that go into this solution. The AI architects, absolutely. The DevOps creating the software, absolutely. But the number one person that is part of this whole thing is the operation line engineer who's got to see the results that I'm returning and validate each of these results. When it comes to AI, my friends, it's not just about one particular group within the firm that's managing it. It's truly interdisciplinary. And this is where Canada has succeeded tremendously. Next slide. As I wait for the next slide to transition, very quickly, I will talk about this. When you're thinking about AI, think about it through one statement. Previously, we would tell computers what to do. Today, we give computers lots and lots and lots of data and have computers tell us what's the best thing for us to do. Top down versus bottom up. Top down, very simple. Tell the calculator 1 + 1 = 2. Programmatic scripts that keep getting refined as you keep changing the scripts. The beauty of AI is if I go to my Google Mini this morning or Google Home this morning and I ask it what's 1 + 1, and it responds back by saying, hey, Ali, aren't you a data scientist? You should know the answer to this. This is a trick question. AI now is using data, not just data from, hey, this is Ali and I recognize Ali to his voice. Hey, this is Ali and his profile indicates that he is so, so, and so. He shouldn't be asking questions to this effect. These tools now are being developed bottom up. Develop a script that can ingest lots and lots and lots of data. Key thing to remember in bottom-up programming, which is what drives predominantly most of our AI solutions, all comes down to the data. If it's garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. If it's good stuff in, you're going to get good stuff out. Always pay attention to the accuracy rates. I cannot tell you how many times, and I'm sure Tom can comment on this, how many companies have suffered because of not actually understanding the importance of those accuracy rates. Not just the accuracy rates, but the explainability of those accuracy rates. It's one thing to go to the mortgage broker and say, hey, do I qualify for a mortgage? Mortgage broker puts it into an AI tool, and the tool says you don't qualify. Meanwhile, the person makes $200K per year, should qualify, has no liabilities against them. And when the person says, well, why didn't I qualify? It's no good for the mortgage agent to say, the AI said you don't qualify, so thus you don't qualify. How can you make AI more explainable, more relatable, and trace the evolution of that data? Next slide. And this will be the closing slide. Always remember this, that when you're dealing with AI solutions, you've got reactive solutions, which is the 1 + 1 = 2. You've got solutions that are using a certain pool of data, and over a period of time, they're developing some form of a theory of mind where they're able to be more alert about different contextual realities. Someone signing in at 1 a.m. versus someone signing into Netflix at 1 p.m. What are they most likely to watch? If it's 1 a.m. and it's on a weekend versus 1 a.m. and it's on a weeknight, what do you think that they would be interested in watching? Developing that contextual reality. Self-awareness and the singularity of AI, this is definitely something that I worry about a great deal, and I always like to mention this, is that when you're dealing with AI, keep in mind the human element as well. I, for one, completely against the weaponization of AI. There are a lot of models out there that do that. Always think about the human impact. Next slide, please, and that will be the final one. Core areas of technologies that have facilitated AI, all of them are out there and all of them you can see. The two things that I'll draw your attention to is IoT and cloud computing. When it comes to IoT, I will tell you this very clearly. Internet of Things can very easily become the Internet of Threats if you're not paying attention to the privacy and security elements that go with gathering data. Absolutely important that Tom brought out all of the ethical elements of AI running in Canada, simply because we have to be responsible for what we're deploying. Secondly, there's got to be accountability around AI solutions. It is very easy to fall into the speed of AI and assume that all of its responses are par excellence. There's got to be a way to interrogate your AI solution. Secondly, from a security standpoint and cloud, when you're gathering and generating lots and lots of citizen data, especially, you have a commitment to protecting that data. I cannot tell you how much of a field day spies and hackers are having with the amount of data that we're storing today and the amount of data that lands up in the dark web for people to use. We need this data because we want to optimize our services. A hacker needs that data because somewhere in that data is the answer to that multi-factor authentication that can get you into that can get them into your bank accounts. They get into mine, well, they'll probably feel bad and leave me some money, but into the rest of you, they probably will cause a lot of significant damage. Have to think about the security and privacy elements when it comes to AI. Next slide, please. And with that, my closing statement about AI has always been one simple point. And that is, when you're thinking about artificial intelligence, surround yourself with the right people. It is about people, process, technology, and in that order. There are scripts out there that you can use, but you need to have a good process out there, and you need to have good people around it as well. And there's one thing I can say about the group that's organized this webinar. When it comes to AI, there's nothing artificial about their intelligence. If you're based in Dubai or based in Canada, this is a great group to work with and build your AI solutions with. With that, I'll take a pause, and Rohit, sir, back to you.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Tom. Wonderful, wonderful presentations to both of you. I really appreciated how Tom, I didn't even know that Canada was so brought into AI. I knew it was one of the founding fathers, but I didn't know it was nationwide. We always think it's concentrated in Montreal and Toronto. So that was very fascinating to see. And then Ali, I love this statement. I wrote this down as to how AI is like onboarding a human being into an organization. So I think that was very, very insightful to see. So to both of you, and Ali, you kind of ended this with this, and Tom, would love to kind of get your feedback. We've seen in the news quite a bit of what's happening in Google around the AI ethics and how they've let go of their top individuals that were involved with the AI ethics. And Ali, you talked about that this is one of the big differentiations that Canada provides. So I'd love to kind of get your feedback from both Ali and Tom as to how you have seen Canada provide that competitive advantage and holding ethics in the center of its core capability or competency.
Tom, go ahead, sir.
Sure. I think this is something that we realized very early on, that, as much as there are some very interesting applications for AI, and I'd love to go into one in particular that's kind of top of mind, but I'll save it and see if there's interest, in the provision of public services. We have to be really, really careful as well. The problem with AI is, done improperly, AI will bake in certain biases based on the way data has always been treated, the way groups have always been treated in society, and so forth. And we have to be very careful that AI isn't actually reinforcing and making those biases worse. So what we're trying to do, I think, is first of all, we have to be very careful about the protection of privacy. As Ali said, I don't think most of the hackers are leaving money in accounts. I wish they'd visit me if they were. But most of the time, if we are kind of loose with our policies, then we're putting out our citizens' data into, into the wider internet. And this can have some very disastrous results. So what we have to be careful with is, as we're trying to incorporate AI into things, even in the provision of public goods, in government business, is that we're making sure that we're taking into account the ethical aspects of it, that we are being responsible in the introduction of AI, and that we're not simply trying to see if something's going to work. We have to know it's going to work. We have to try to think through the entire problem, because as Ali kind of talked about, a tool used improperly is a big negative and can do a great deal of harm. AI has wonderful possibilities, and we're seeing a lot of them right now, but the downside is also there. And it's our job a lot of the time as regulators, and as kind of stewards of the public good, to make sure that we're putting those safeguards in place, that those rails are there, so that we don't see the negative side of AI doing things that we should have been able to anticipate, but didn't put the time in. So as much as a lot of people say, oh, let's just get on with it, let's create companies faster, let's scale up faster, let's introduce AI faster. The other side of the equation is, let's make sure it's done properly. Let's make sure that this doesn't have a disastrous effect, that we are not harming ourselves or our future or the sustainability of our economy by kind of introducing AI just as it's created. It's a bit of a long-winded answer, but basically it says it's important for us to do the thinking part, to have the policy part down pat, even though it's not the sexiest part of of the ecosystem. It's something that we've put a lot of emphasis on in Canada. Go ahead, Ali. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. No, everything that Tom said on point. Rohit, two things that I'll draw your attention to. Number one is, I often get companies that will speak to me and say, hey, we want to completely eliminate all security risks, and we want to make sure that we are completely secure, blah, blah, blah. You're never going to get rid of security risk. You're only going to lower that risk. There's a difference between taking a risk and being risky. When you take a risk, you go down a new path, but you know how to come back. When you're being risky, you're just going down a path and there's no way to come back. And this is very true with a lot of AI solutions, especially in the medtech and edtech space, which has seen a hyper growth over the last 2 months. Like in 2 months, we've seen 2 years worth of innovation in these spaces. You've got to measure risk very, very well. Number one. And this is why I feel that from a Canadian context, when we take an interdisciplinary approach towards AI and involve, for example, human resources in what we're developing, involve our ethics committees at the college in what we're developing, it definitely provides the right oversight on whatever it is that you're doing. Number one. Number two, when it comes to Canadian approaches to ethical AI, yes, there have been federal bodies out there that have different groups and think tanks that have been developed, so on and so forth. But I will tell you this, that within Canada, access to data is not like a drive-through Tim Hortons. You have to jump through a few hoops. And while a lot of people tend to think, this is an impediment and we need instant access, and then they default to places like Kaggle, etc. When you want real non-synthetic data, you've got to jump through a few hoops. And I'm glad that those hoops exist. Does nothing for my waistline, but certainly does a lot to get me thinking about how I want to be, what are the questions, and gets me asking, do I really need that data? Some may argue that these data barriers that we have can be an impediment to innovation. I think it's the necessary checks that you need from mavericks like myself to just be like, check yourself before you wreck yourself, right? Do you really need this data? Is it worth jumping through all of these hoops? So that's how I think the Canadian context is well positioned to continue to deliver quality AI, albeit at a slow commercializing space, but ethical AI as well.
Oh, great answer. And I think both of you, it proves that even though you have this impediment that you talked about, Ali, but Canada is still leading, right? So I think a lot of people are also appreciating, a lot of companies from, I think it was 9 billion that Tom you presented, there's about over 9 billion in investment. That just speaks volume as to the appreciation of having ethics in the center. So we do have a question on the chat as well from Barbara. So she says, thank you for the presentation, quite interesting. In the approach of AI introduction into any company, what recommendation would you give to organizations to ensure that the human touch aspect is not lost?
Great question. Tom, if you want to go, then I can.
Sure, I can speak a bit from the experience I've had, but probably Ali, you can get much more in depth to it. The important part, I think, as Ali kind of highlighted, is that you take a deliberate approach to the introduction of AI, that you try to find, you're not destroying your business processes, but you're trying to adapt them and make them better. through recursive learning, through the introduction of AI. And in order to do that, your people have to be on the ball. They have to understand a plan for it. They have to understand how to measure the success or the failure of the introduction. And they have to have the resources and experience at their fingertips. Now, in a lot of organizations, that will mean bringing in people externally who have a greater capacity, let's say, to understand the AI that's being brought into the process. But your people have to be involved with them at every step, because these people, much like business consultants will come from the McKinseys of the world and so forth, can come in with great expertise, but they don't know your business as well as you know your business. That's where you have to be involved very, very carefully, because you can have a great AI-powered, customer relationship management system, but if it doesn't work the way your business needs it to, it's absolutely useless for you, and it'll actually be a distraction. It will slow down your processes. In the end, you will actually lose your competitiveness rather than gain it. So I would say the important part, if you're looking at keeping the personal aspect in it, is you want people with experience in your organization who are then melded together with those who will be introducing the AI to make sure that AI is customized to what you need it to do. Ali, go ahead.
Absolutely perfect, Tom. I appreciate that context. Three things that I'll talk about when it comes to the human touch. Number one is you got to keep it real. And there's no two ways to talk about that. Yes, AI is out there and it will disrupt certain jobs as we know it, just as it's disrupting certain industries as we know it. So number one, you have to keep it real. If the idea within deploying a particular AI solution is to reduce the amount of human oversight or the amount of human time being spent on something, be open about it. Because there are obvious advantages sometimes when you do that. Advantages and disadvantages. I've seen multi-million dollar firms reject using AI for certain pieces. Why? Because the involvement of a team in that work added to the brand, added to the spirit, added to the narrative of the company. So number one, be real and be holistic with understanding that if AI is going to be introduced into a particular process, what does this do to the human beings that are conducting those particular jobs? Number one. And for many, it might just be a financial analysis, which is fine, but it's a big risky analysis that you're undertaking. That's number one. Number two, from my perspective, when it comes to understanding the role of how to involve the human touch, I keep talking about feedback loops. AI solutions, when they give you different responses, AI solutions, when they give you different recommendations, these need to go through a feedback loop. You should be testing and analyzing your AI outputs through experts at all times. So when making a recommendation of a particular product over the other, what do the product experts say? Was this the right recommendation for these profiles? And maintain that human interaction, maintain that feedback loop consistently. One of the best designed AI products are AI products that are constantly interrogating their accuracy rates through human validation. The last thing that I'll mention is that within teams, to maintain the human touch, especially in the organizations, I cannot underestimate how important professional development and training is, especially with trainers who can take an AI concept and break it down into a way which makes it more and more relatable. One of the things that I said at a recent training session that I did is I reminded the teams that when you come to the end of what you know, you've come to the start of what you can sense. Encourage them to sense different things. Encourage them to provide their feedback, even if they don't know Python scripting or anything else from the world of AI. That's my approach to the human touch.
It's a great point, Ali. And in my previous role as a senior partner at Wipro, one of the leading global cereal manufacturers was a client of ours, and we had to use RPAs, robotic process automation, to automate their accounts receivable and accounts payable factors. And so that was going to impact 1,500 employees. And so we partnered with this organization, this manufacturing organization, to say, look, yes, we're going to have 1,500 people that aren't going to do the same job, but how do we retrain them? So one of the points that you brought in, we looked at the onboarding of RPA, but at the same time, we brought in the change management to what you were saying. How could we retrain them? How can we reclassify them? We weren't successful in obviously securing all 1,500. That wouldn't be feasible. There was a percentage that we had to go, but it was a conscious effort for both the consulting that I was providing and both for the manufacturing side of things. So there is a good collaboration that can happen where the individuals can upskill them. I think we have time for one more question from Ruda. What is the minimum amount of data you need in order to implement an AI? What is the minimum efficient scale?
Yep. Tom, do you want to go?
I'll give it a shot. That's a tough question. I don't think it'll depend a lot on what you're trying to accomplish, right? If you have a small amount of data, you have the problem where you've probably got biases in that data that you don't have with data on a grand scale. So an AI system is basically probabilistic and predictive. So it takes what's coming at it, it tries to optimize it by looking at it and try to take out the outliers, find the most efficient path or the most efficient solution. The less data you have, the more likely you're going to have, unintended bias, you're going to have fluke luck, you're going to have a bunch of different things in there. So the more data, I think, the better over time. In the same way, I'll give the example of a radiologist. So a radiologist might do, look at 1,000 x-rays a year for a career of 30 years. By the end of it, they've got 30,000 x-rays under their belt. They know what they're doing. AI can take in data in the hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions, billions of x-rays, and it'll use that to figure out, where were the failures and how do I avoid them, and where's the proper diagnosis and how do I reinforce that. So, I think, I'm dancing around the answer a little bit, but I think, AI at any scale will be potentially useful, but the less data you have, the less likely the result is going to be the optimal one. Does that make sense, Ali?
No, 100%. Everything that you said there was on point. I'll just leave you with 3 steps that I do with the companies that we work with. Number 1 is I'll ask them about the question that they're trying to solve using AI, and I'll ask them for at least 500 data points. Remember this, good data analysts, good AI practitioners are good storytellers. If I can get at least 500 data points, it's very easy for me then to take those 500 data points and visualize them on Tableau or Power BI, okay? Let me look at the story that the data is telling me, and how easy do these commercially available tools like Tableau, how easily do they visualize the data that you're giving me? 500 data points as a rule of thumb. I've had companies come with 200 or even 300. When you visualize that data, even if it's just 500 data points, it sparks creativity, it sparks curiosity. When I visualize that and I show it to the client, they look at that and they go, I could actually get you more information about how people are buying our products, because I have a retailer in, somewhere in rural Manitoba, and they can give us some data as well. It starts to spark imagination. So the first thing I like to do is, if the company tells you they've got heaps and heaps and heaps of data, the rule of thumb is talk to your engineers and say, how much data can we truly process within our compute to make sure that the experience is seamless? Is it a terabyte? Is it 10 terabytes? What is it? And work with that, okay? But if it's a company that's starting at a point where they're not really sure, at least get 500 data points. And what does 500 data points means? 500 instances of how customers are purchasing and what they're purchasing. That will be sufficient. Visualize that. And when you visualize it, it'll spark that curiosity. Now, I will add one more note, which is my third point. Even if a company comes with lots and lots of dots of data, terabytes and data, it's not just about voluminous data. That data has to be relevant. So you need to know the questions to ask, and you need to be very succinct in saying, is it really relevant to have this data set as opposed to this data set? You've got to know the business pretty well in order to know what data is valid for you. Absolutely, when there's lots of data, you need to relate it to the compute, you need to relate it to the user experience. Lastly, if you have zero data, there are synthetic data sets that you can get from, let's say, Kaggle. Data brokers is becoming a job and has been a job for the last couple of years. You can always buy synthetic data sets. I always advise people, if you're going to buy synthetic data sets, do it with a little bit of caution, simply because you want to make sure that it's anonymized and no personal identifiable information, blah, blah, blah. In fact, I think the CBC would probably want to do something in the future on privacy and security of data, because that is a very, very intense topic. Another one in which Canada is at the lead. We have people like Dr. Ann Kavukian, Kat Kood, and many others. That's my response, Mr. Rohit.
Thank you so much, Ali. I know we're on top of the hour. Diana, Ruda, any other questions, or do you want me to just wrap up? Or Zinnia?
Rohit.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Tom, CBC, and Ali. Thank you so much. It was a riveting discussion. Really, like I said, loved how Canada is using ethics as a center value proposition, as really expanding nationwide to end to end nation, which is fantastic, all the way from Victoria to Halifax. Ali, I love the line about having eyesight without insight is blind. I think CBC is in the t-shirt making business, so we should definitely trademark for that for you. And to the rest of the attendees, thank you so much for attending. Please feel free to reach out to Tom, Ali, or myself if there's any questions. Looks like we're looking to bring these guys back in and see how much more we can do with AI, and not just at a Canada scale, but at a global scale.
And
thank you so much, everyone.
Last thing, if you enjoyed this programming, there's more coming down the pipeline. Our next Technology Connect group event will be focusing on the fintech sector, and it'll be taking place on March 31st or 30th. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much, everyone. Thank
you
you,
very much,
Zinia, and the
Alberto.
team, and everyone in Canada and here. Take good care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us.